Welcome back to my podcast, listeners. We're in episode 77, and today I'll tell you about my first actual boyfriend. From the moment I had started college at the age of 15, a few different guys had expressed interest in me, but I soon noticed a worrying pattern in my behavior or feelings. As soon as the guy started interacting with me or actually went out on a date with me, I would start feeling a feeling of revulsion, of dislike for that guy. I couldn't explain it, I couldn't understand it. This happened with about 5 different guys in a period of a few months. So by the time I was 16, I started avoiding guys and potentially romantic situations altogether. So then, when I moved to Sophia College, which was an all-girls college, I had almost zero contact with boys. Meanwhile, I was working on myself and was paying attention to my spirituality, my emotional landscape, my intellect, my physical health and fitness, my empathy, and those kinds of things. I truly wanted to realize my potential in all aspects of life and become the best possible version of myself. But the one constant in my life had been how marriage and romance still seemed to be the most important aspect of life for me. As far as I was concerned, that was the only goal that truly mattered to me. Everything else was just a filler in between. It was as though every moment of life had meaning only in the context of leading me towards my romantic partner. This fascination with the idea of marriage predated any romantic fairy tales or movies that I might have come across. People usually attribute movies and stories for the romantic obsession of some girls. For me, this fascination started when I had seen a wedding for the first time. I was 2 years old and I had seen Sukh and Swarn getting married. And I was so fascinated with the idea of marriage and having a special someone in your life. Someone who just loves you more specially than he loves someone else, and someone whom you love more specially than you would love anyone else. I was just so taken by this idea. By the time I was 18, I was so clear that I wanted to be married that even though I knew the kind of person my mom was and the kind of temperament she had, I still gathered my guts. It took me a lot of courage to go and tell her, "Mom, please get me married. Please look for a boy for me. I'm so interested in getting married." And my mother started making fun of me. She started laughing at me. My maid, when she found out, because my mom would just announce things to everyone, or probably the maid was around at that time, I'm not sure. They were all like, "हो, कैसी लड़की है? खुद ही बोल रही है शादी करनी है." Like, "Oh, what kind of girl are you? You are saying yourself that you want to get married." And my mom just refused. She's like, "नहीं, पहले बड़ी की करेंगे. No, I'll get your older sister married first. You focus on your studies." So then when I was 20, I asked again. I kept expressing that I was really interested in getting married, but mom would just refuse to get me married. And she would say, "First, I'll get my older daughter married." And I remember once when they were looking for a boy for Ruby, and one family said, "You know what, we are not into Ruby, but we are interested in your second daughter." And I was very happy. I was like, "Oh, they might get me married now because this family is interested in me." And mom just told them, "Nahi, hum to pehle badi ki karenge. No, we'll get our older daughter married first." And they just wouldn't listen to me when I told them that my priority was to get married. Please look out for a guy for me. They just would refuse to do that. They found it very funny and they just made fun of me about it. And then what else could I say after that? I had reached age 19 now with no boy in my life. Meanwhile, my friends had helped me have my transformation or my makeover of sorts. They'd helped me with getting my hair looking better, my skin looking better. I'd started dressing nicer. So basically, I was looking a lot better than I did before. I had become fit, I had lost weight, I had lost all my puppy fat, baby fat, whatever you call it. So I was slender, I looked lovely. And by this time, the bus had started from Vikhroli station towards Bamkana Ghatkopar side. So basically, the Godrej Hillside stop was one of the stops. So most days I preferred to walk, but some days I waited for the bus. Now this particular day had been a long day in college. I was tired and I went to the bus stop and had just missed a bus. I stood there knowing that the next bus would probably take another 15 minutes. It takes about 10 minutes to reach home if you walk really fast. Home was a kilometer away. And 15 minutes if you walked a little slower. But I was so exhausted, I just waited at the bus stop, hoping that the next bus might come sooner. Sometimes you got two buses back to back. It depended on the traffic. I'd been waiting about 10 minutes. It was almost 15 minutes and there was no bus in sight. And then this one guy comes on a bike and he asks me, "Hey, do you want a lift to go to your place?" And I looked at him. I had seen this guy at an ice cream shop. There were a few shops adjacent to the station. And when you walked to the bus stop, you crossed these shops. But when you walked home straight, you did not cross these shops. So basically, I had seen this guy in the ice cream shop a few times. So I assumed he owned the ice cream shop. So now I looked at this guy. He was a Sardar guy who tied a patka on his head. So for those who don't know, a patka is a stitched piece of cloth that you tie over your untrimmed hair that's tied into a bun at the top of your head. That Sardar guys or Sikh guys would use. Usually a grown adult would tie a turban and little children tied the patka. But sometimes an adult just tied a patka. So this guy was not wearing a turban, he was wearing a patka. And since there are such few Sardars in that area, you would definitely notice one. So right now he was on his motorbike and he asked me if I wanted a ride home. And I said okay. So I sat on the bike and he dropped me home. I said thanks and I went home. I had not expected him to give me a ride, but I assumed that he was on his way home, which was actually not the time for him to be going home because the shop was open right up to 9 or maybe even later at night. That's when a lot of people came to buy things. I was not sure what to feel about this, but the guy seemed to be interested in talking to me, and I was very tickled because it had been a really, really long time since a guy had spoken to me. The next evening, I walked to the bus stop and this guy came on his bike and he was like, "Hey, do you want to be dropped home?" And I said, okay. And he dropped me home. The next day, he called me into his ice cream shop because passing by, I said hello and smiled politely because now this guy had dropped me home twice. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come hang out here?" So I awkwardly went and sat in the ice cream shop and he asked me if I wanted ice cream and I said, "No, thank you." And there were two other people at the store. Kevin, it turns out, was actually the owner of the store. And this guy, whom I only knew as Grover, he introduced himself as Grover, which is basically a Sardar surname. It was not his first name, but he was called Grover, it seems, by everyone. So I knew him only as Grover. Grover introduced himself and then they had hired an employee, a teen boy called Hemant. So Hemant was this good-looking, tall boy. Kevin looked really nice. Grover looked meh, so-so. He was okay. So he was basically the least good-looking guy of the three, but the only one who showed interest in me. And I had not had a guy interested in me for so long. So we sat, we chatted a little bit. Then after that day, another day, Grover invited me to his store. We sat and we chatted. Then after a bit, Grover asked, "Hey, would you like to just hang out at my place?" And I said, sure. I was very excited. By this time, I was majorly falling head over heels for this guy simply because he was interested in me and he had a way of carrying himself. It was not just the appearance. He had the confidence. He had a way of talking. He told me that he was a jive dancer. He had been a professional jive dancer. And we have a famous jive dancer of the 90s here in India. His name is Javed Jaffrey, who is also an actor. He's acted in many A-grade movies. So I thought it was a very big deal. I was starstruck. I was like, wow, you have danced with Javed Jaffrey and you've jived like in the same competitions as him. You have interacted with this star actor person. This was the first time I was meeting someone who knew a nationally known actor. So I was in awe of Grover. I was so intimidated by anything Western because we were not given access to that growing up. So I had glamorized it so much and I thought anything local or Indian was not really up to the mark. So anyone who knew more than me, first of all, I glamorized and I was intimidated by them and I was fascinated by them. I thought they were better than me. So here was Grover. He knew this actor Javed Jaffrey personally. He used to go and jive in competitions or, just somebody who could jive, somebody who could dance and who had been to places where I had never been. He was familiar with nightlife. He was familiar with celebrities. Oh my God, I was so much in awe of him. He also told me that he was 29 years old, but I did not care. I mean, in India, it was quite common to see couples who had huge age gaps. And I was just so taken by him, and I allowed myself to fall head over heels with this guy. Just fell in love. To me at the time, definitely it was falling in love. I know now people have a different parameter. They're like, oh, that is a crush, that is puppy love, baby love. But real love is when you've known someone years and you're so committed to them, and it is beyond that romantic fascination. But at that time, people did believe in love at first sight, falling head over heels, and that is what I was experiencing. It did not matter that most other people were better looking than him. I was falling for his persona, for his accomplishments, what I thought they were his accomplishments, and everything that I perceived him to be. He was so many things that I was not. I was this naive, sheltered, shy, self-conscious girl, and here was Grover, supremely self-confident. He'd seen the world. He knew so much more than me. So I was just fascinated, and I allowed myself to just go and flow with my feelings. So when Grover said, would you like to come and hang out at my place? I said, sure. Now, I had by this time some idea what men and women do, but I had been unkissed, untouched ever, other than the time I was molested, and that I will not count. I will block that out. That's not what I call your first kiss or first touch or whatever. So here I was so happy and so fascinated. I was experiencing that lover's high. And we went to the place, which was actually Kevin's place, and Grover was staying at Kevin's place. So Grover told me that he had a girlfriend and he used to live with her, and she was a girl called Sophia who worked at a huge firm called IL&FS, Infrastructure Leasing and Finance something company. And he used to live with her. Apparently, his folks tried to get him married when he was younger, and he did not like that control that they were trying to exert over him. They had taken him to see many girls. Now, in Indian culture, that's a common thing. When a boy is of marriageable age, when parents earlier, at least in the 80s and 90s, when the boy was 24, 25, they would start looking for girls for him, and the girl's parents also would start looking for guys for her. So his parents had many times tried to trick him into seeing girls, like telling him, hey, we are just visiting socially and come along with us, and or at least drop by at some point. And when he would go, he would realize this is a meeting with the girl's family, and he would get pissed. It didn't matter how pretty the girl was, how nice she was. He did not want to be married like that in an arranged marriage. And so he had moved out and started living with this girl, Sophia, at her place. And she was a divorcee, I think. Probably a little older than him. She was a divorcee. And then they used to fight. And then one day they had a huge fight. And she threw him out at night. And then she flung his clothes out of the balcony. It was a higher story house. And his clothes just fell all over the place. And then he left. And from that time, he was at Kevin's place. And I was like, okay. And then after that, we sat around at his house talking, and he had a mattress on the floor itself. So I just kind of leaned on the mattress, kind of lay down. And then Grover went to get water or something for me. And then I think he just looked at me. I laid on the mattress, like on my belly, I just laid down. And I was reading whatever, there was a magazine or something I was reading. So then Grover just came up from behind, and then he grabbed me and started kissing me. And to me, I was like, whoa, my first kiss, my first kiss. So there's like two perceptions. So there's one part of me so happy that, whoa, Grover is kissing me. And there's another part of me observing just how bad this kiss was. It was like being mauled by an animal, as though that animal is trying to eat your mouth. It was a kiss of somebody who does not know how to kiss. And this man was 29 years old, and he had had a girlfriend. And it was, you know how when an animal attacks you, you are just kind of fending it off, and you don't really, now I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember once I had written a blog post about detailing that kiss, and it was literally a very, very bad kiss. It felt like I was being attacked by some creature, entity, animal, I don't know, but basically a very unpleasant kiss. So there is this one side of me that is dispassionately observing just how bad the kiss was. Then there is the other side of me that is just happy that Grover is showing this level of interest in me, that things are moving to the next level, first base. And then Grover kind of started pouncing on my shoulders, arms, chest, back, or whatever. It was such a flurry of activity, and I was very happy. And then after some time, he offered to drop me back home, and I said okay. And he gave me some little gifts. There was a tiny little teddy bear holding balloons. It was literally like a 1-inch teddy bear, small fluffy thing. It was extremely beautiful, pastel colors, and the balloons were also all different colors. It was a light blue teddy bear. And he gave me a few other gifts over the next few days, and I was just so happy. There was a crystal duck also, a glass duck, very cute stuff. The kind of stuff you would find at an Archie's store. In the 90s, Archie's stores were a big thing. They used to have such cute things like greeting cards and little romantic gifts and little hearts, little teddy bears. So it was those kind of things, very cute things. So I was on cloud 9. And when I went to college, I so excitedly told my best friend Swati, I told her I got my first kiss, I got my first boyfriend. And she was like, what? Tell me all about it. And Swati seemed more like analytical, critical, dissecting. She wanted to know every word, every gesture, every action. And she was trying to dissect everything. And Grover had kept saying, I wish I'd met you sooner. And she's like, why did he say, I wish I'd met you sooner? And I was like, I don't know. I guess he wished he met me sooner. And then the next few days were a flurry. I would get from college, we would sit in the shop for a bit. Once Ruby even saw me at the ice cream shop when she was going home, and then later she was like, oh my god, you tell mom and dad you have extra classes. So I used to make it a point to always call up and tell my folks something if I was running late or if something was different from what it was scheduled to be. And now when I was meeting Grover every day, I would just call up and tell them, I got extra classes and now for a few days or whatever. I used to just tell them that I have some extra classes, I'm going to be late, and they would be like, okay. And Ruby's like, I know you're lying at home, you're actually sitting with that Sardar guy in the ice cream shop, I've seen you. And I was like, okay. So the next few days was such a flurry. I was on cloud 9 in joy, just feeling so elated. We used to sit on his bike, he used to take me places, and 1 or 2 days I think I skipped college and we went somewhere, sat in a park, and I was so fond of him. I put my arm around him and he was like, just sitting as though I'm the girl and you are the guy. And I told him I just like you so much that I felt I should put my arm around you. Like, I felt protective towards him. I loved him so much. My feelings were all 100% real and genuine. Now, the first time Grover tried to take off my clothes, when I look back at it, it's hilarious. I was so interested in showing him what a lovely person, what a good girl I was, that when he was taking off my clothes, I was folding them and keeping them. And later he was like, I was wondering what you're doing. At that time, I didn't know that it's okay to just kind of leave your clothes where they are when you are making out or when you're passionate. I thought you have to just always be neat and clean. So I was folding the clothes as we were taking them off. So Grover was there doing his thing, what one would call making out. But to me, it literally, to the observer in me, it just felt like some animal is pouncing on you and attacking you. It was actually physically painful when he would kiss me and make out with me and touch different parts of my body. I used to feel actual physical pain and sometimes even bruises, and he had no idea that he was such a bad lover, maybe, or maybe Sophie liked that, I don't know. But as he would be doing all this, even my breasts and nipples would be in distress and pain when he would be touching them, and I did not know what it's supposed to feel like, right? How would I know? I had nothing to compare that with, but I was just on this lover's high. It didn't matter that he was a bad lover. Men, please forgive me for what I'm about to say. My intention is not to be mean. I'm just trying to make an honest video. I'm trying to honestly express what's been going on in my life, and this is part of that. So please forgive me, guys. Please don't take this personally. But the first time that Grover removed his clothes and the first time that I saw his privates, it was absolutely horrifying for me. I tried not to show it on my face, but I don't know why the appearance of a man's private parts feels so repulsive to so many women. And not just the first time. Sometimes every time you look at one, it gives you an adverse reaction. The first time I had looked at a male privates was by chance when I was 5 or 6, and I happened to see this little baby boy, and that itself had traumatized me so much that my mind had repressed that. And now looking at Grover's privates, This was my first view of a full-grown adult male's private parts, and I was shocked to say the least. So when Grover removed his clothes and I saw his privates, I tried my best not to show my horror on my face, but I was quite horrified by what it looked like. And I knew that there was something which was the shaft, but what I did not expect was the ball sack. That was next level horror. And the smell was a whole different story. That was another aspect that had not occurred to me. The smell, the appearance, all in all, do not recommend. But here it was, and here we were. And we were getting physical. There was no denying it. And what I did notice that was a few times he did try to part my legs and shove it in. He tried to shove it in after a little bit of this foreplay, maybe 10 minutes of this where I felt like I was being attacked by some creature. After 10 or 15 minutes of that, he used to try to shove it in constantly. And I think he would have succeeded if it had not been for the fact that my vagina was completely sealed shut. I wouldn't even have known the location of my vagina if you'd asked me. Right from the time I had started touching myself for pleasure, it had always been the clit. That vaginal area was untouched, and my vagina was just completely closed. And now that I think back, thank God this man would have just inserted his thing, and that was not okay. He did not have protection or anything. He would just be like doing his thing on top of me, and then he would just start thrusting and shoving. I distinctly remember thinking that I did not want him to penetrate, but I wouldn't say it or couldn't say anything. Now, would this be considered consent? Suppose you were debating about this or you were discussing it in a court of law. Was this consent? I know clearly 100% in my mind I did not want him to penetrate, but I did not resist. I did not say no. Now, this reminds me of the Roy situation where I was hating every second of it. But I did not say no, I could not say no, and I actually went back to him when he was doing all these things that I did not want him to do. So now the Grover situation was somewhat like this. I was okay with him making out with me and kissing me, even though it felt horrible, but I certainly did not want him to have intercourse with me. That was a strict no-no for me, and yet I was not stopping him. I did not verbally say yes, but I did not even try to stop him when he kept trying to shove it in. I was just letting him, though I did not want to let him. So this is a thing about women where people would question, why didn't you say no? Why didn't you say you were not comfortable? I don't know, but I didn't want him to do that. That is very clear to me. In my mind, I was like, think back on it. That is typical of the kind of childhood I had had. I had not been taught boundaries. I had been taught to submit. And that combined with my naturally gentle and sweet temperament had resulted in me in this setup. So here we were with Grover constantly trying to make love to me and not really succeeding. And then he would stop when it wasn't going in, he would just stop. And then I thought, I need to do something for my boyfriend. And like, what should I do? I love him so much. And I had heard about oral. So I thought, hey, I should give him oral if I want to pleasure him. And I did not know that time how gross it would feel. So I started, and when I was getting nearer to the thing, I was feeling this revulsion and my body was just not wanting to do it. But that was like the supreme sacrifice I was making because I loved this person. It didn't matter how repulsive I was finding it. I started doing this thing. And I was hating every second of it, but I thought, no, I love this man and I'm doing this for him. This is what girls do. If you love a guy, you give him oral, you give him a blowjob. So I was doing this and I don't remember how long I had been doing it, and then I stopped. And the guy was like, I hope that was good for you because it was brutal for me. So I was really hurt. I said, what do you mean? He said, oh my God, I think there are red scars where your teeth have touched. And I was so embarrassed and humiliated. Here I was not liking it at all, but thinking that I'm making this supreme sacrifice. I'm doing this to pleasure my boyfriend. And here was my boyfriend not liking it at all, but tolerating it because somehow he thought that I was enjoying it. Why would I enjoy it? I don't think anybody enjoys putting a dick in their mouth. No. Maybe later at some point, but not the first time, certainly. So then we did not do that again because he did not like it. At no point, however, in this entire relationship or in the entire time that Grover touched me, did I feel anything resembling arousal. On the contrary, I used to be in pain and kind of gritting my teeth for it. I would be bracing for it. At no point did I feel pleasure at all when he touched me or when he was around me or when I thought of him. But still, I was experiencing the lover's high, and at that time, it seemed like that was all I needed. And this went on for some time. I now can't remember if it was 2 weeks or 2 months, but this did go on for some period of time until it was interrupted. One day in the morning, I sat in the bus because I had decided to go to Ghatkopar station and catch a fast train. So these trains had certain timings, so I thought I'll pop into a bus, go straight to Ghatkopar and catch a fast train. And when I looked out the window of my bus, what do I see? I see Grover on his bike with a woman behind him sitting as though she were his girlfriend. And I was so shocked and I was so hurt. So that whole day at school, I did not feel good. I discussed with Swati, and Swati was like, remember when he said, I wish I'd met you sooner? So I was waiting to go and talk to him about this. And in the evening, when I got down from the train, I went to his ice cream shop. And as we were talking, I was feeling so sad and heartbroken. And I told him, I saw you in the morning. And he was like, oh. And he was like, oh, no, you're misunderstanding. She had just come to my place in the morning to say sorry. And then I went to drop her back to her house. That was my ex-girlfriend. So I was like, is it? He's like, yes, of course. She had just come to apologize and that was it. And I just dropped her. That's what you saw. So I accepted it and I said, okay. And then a couple of days passed. And then one day when I got down from the train, I was with Hema, the girl from my township who had also moved to Sophia College after I had moved to Sophia College. I have mentioned her in a previous episode. So Hema and I were in the train coming back from college. And this time I was very self-conscious about my breath because I had these wisdom teeth that were really hurting me, and I had been going to the dentist telling him that I'm in extreme pain and there was actual pus forming around these teeth, and the doctor was like, we'll wait and watch. And then I knew that it was affecting my breath because once a girl in college had also told me, hey, your breath is not okay. And now I don't know what to do. These wisdom teeth are creating some pus in my mouth, and all day I used to try and do something about my breath. But so this one day I had nothing on my person. I did not have mints. I did not have saunf. Saunf is something that you chew to freshen your breath, the fennel seeds. So I was like so self-conscious. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to meet Grover. And I asked him, hey, do you have any mints or chewing gum or something? I need something to freshen my breath. And Hema was like, oh, sorry, I don't have anything. So I knew my breath was not fresh and I was really self-conscious about it, but there was nothing I could do. And now I was already feeling very awkward. Now as I walk to the shop, I see Sophie sitting there in the shop and she says, hi. And I was like, oh, hello. She said, oh, so I got to know that Grover has been seeing you for the past few days. So I was like, yes. So then she said, I thought I should talk to you because we are together. So I was like, oh, he told me that there was nothing between you now. So she said, no, we are definitely together. So then I was so heartbroken. I had already been kind of self-conscious and a little down. And here now was this next blow. And then she said, we do have intercourse now. We do have sex. And I was like, oh, you do? And she's like, yes. So that's when I started feeling so hurt and so sad. And then Hemant is like, do you want ice cream? And I was like, no. And I just got up and walked away. And then Sophie felt really sorry for me. And then she reached out to me and she's like, hey, I feel really bad. We had just had a fight and then we patched up after some time. And then you unnecessarily got affected in all of this. And then she tried to befriend me. So she called me to her place for Christmas. It was nearing Christmas time. She called me to her place for Christmas. And I was so awkward, but I was also in awe of her. She is this professional woman who owns her own house, who has a live-in boyfriend maybe, and who works at IL and FS. so glamorous according to me. She dressed so beautifully. She had these great hairstyles. She looked so confident. The woman of the world that I was trying to be but never could be, she was already that. So I dropped by at her place for Christmas, and then her sister also had come. Like, her sister had not planned it, but her sister and the sister's husband dropped in. And then when they saw me, her sister was so pissed and she was making angry faces at me, and kind of just the vibe was so off. And then very awkwardly, I was like, okay, I'll go home. And then Sophie was like, no, no, I'll drop you, because my parents had dropped me to her house. I had told them I'm going to this friend's place for Christmas. And after my parents dropped me off, I had told them I would come back with her, because that had been the original plan. And then when her sister was almost abusive towards me, it was very odd, and I wanted to go home, and Sophie was like, no, 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 I'll drop you. And that was a whole awkward thing. After that, for some time, Sophie tried to keep in touch with me. I had invited her for my birthday, and Franklin, Uncle Nancy's husband, asked, how are you friends with her? And Sophie had already discussed. She said, oh, if people ask how we are friends, we'll say we met in the train. We are train friends. So she had already anticipated this, and I was in awe, because I would never have thought that someone will ask, how are you friends with her? Because we are so radically different from each other. And she had anticipated that question. She had planned how to answer it. So at that time, I remember I was so excited that Sophie is coming for my birthday. And now later, my friend was like, what nonsense. Don't be in touch with her. Just stop being in touch with her. And that time she had told me she would even try to get me an internship at ILNFS, because I would soon be graduating. And I had been very excited about that. One day I had even gone to her office. She had called me to her office. I had been there. So for some time I was in touch with Sophie. Maybe she felt guilty that I had unnecessarily got tangled into their fight. So they'd had the fight. She had thrown him out. Then she came back, apologized. Some time had passed, of course, in between. And then they just got back together. And then she felt bad for me. And she could see that I was this innocent, naive girl. And I guess she wanted to just help make me feel better. Then at one point I started realizing, what is this? Why I should not be in touch with Sophie. This is so wrong on so many levels. And then I just started not being in touch with her. That was it. And that was the end of that. But I was left with so much hurt. That was my very first relationship. And he had not been cheating on the girl technically when he was with me, because they had broken up. She had thrown him out. And then later he had told me that when he saw me at the bus stop, he actually did not have to go anywhere, but he'd seen that a bus had just left. And then he had kind of seen after 10 or 15 minutes, he realized, oh, she's still standing there. And because sometimes if you saw a bus was not coming for 10 minutes, you just started walking. So he peeped out. At that time, he had intentionally brought his bike. It was not a coincidence that Grover happened to be passing by on his bike. He had looked, he saw that this girl is standing here. He was newly single as far as he was concerned. So he thought, why not hit on this girl? And now this feels creepy, this 29-year-old guy hitting on a 19-year-old girl, getting this thought process. So I was completely naive and innocent, but also craving for attention from a guy who would love me. But the fact that it worked out this way was not good for me. So this guy had peeped, he had seen I was still standing there after 10 or 15 minutes, and he did not have to go anywhere. He just brought his bike for the sole purpose of starting an interaction with me, and then for the purpose of taking it to the next level. I don't know how much his intention was to exploit me and how much his intention was to actually seek a girlfriend. But this was, I think, a couple of days after he had broken up, or a few days after he had broken up. And much later, 5 or 6 years later, when he did see me with my actual fiance, he tried to hide somewhere, stand and talk to me secretly. And by this time, I was just laughing and thinking, oh, this loser, he's still single, still here. And he had told me about this bike accident he had once and how he had started limping after that. So I had all this empathy for him at that time. I was like, oh no, after that bike accident, his leg was never okay and he has a slight limp. But now I was happy he was limping. I was like, serves him right. This guy should limp. So that was the end of the Grover saga. That was the end of my first boyfriend experience, which was not good. It was very short-lived. I had intense emotions. I had intense joy when he was in my life. I had intense grief when it ended. And all the while I had not even processed how creepy the physical aspect of it was. That was so bad. And I had just not processed it for years. And next time I'll tell you more about my romantic life after that. Till then, stay healthy, stay well, stay happy, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.